Welcome to Hacking Business Technology, the podcast that always starts off with something very interesting. We've got two of our three co-hosts today, or three of our four co-hosts today, actually. Farah, Matt Hooper, and myself. We're missing Mr. Kawasaki. Welcome, you guys.
Hey, Matt.
So, snazzy new introduction. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
IT is no longer relevant. Go. Discuss. Talk amongst yourselves.
Of course, it's not relevant on its own island.
In all seriousness, though, there is actually a lot of ITSM news today. The first and foremost, the one that I think is the most interesting, or the one that I think is the most far-reaching, is that Google is changing their ranking so that if you have a secure socket layer on your website, you will actually get bumped up in the Google results now.
Really?
Oh, I'm sorry, I stated that wrong. If you don't have SSL, you will be bumped down in Google results. That's what it is.
Huh. Security.
And it's kind of interesting, you know, there's two camps now right now on Twitter anyway that are seeing it two different ways. There's the people that are upset about it because, number one, they're going to have to support their parents' businesses' websites and get SSL working on it somehow. And then there's this other camp that's like, well, hey, maybe this will actually make the really crappy web hosts make SSL easier.
Yeah?
That's a good point.
Or did Google buy stock in VeriSign?
Yeah, it's $15. That's the lowest rate that you can get an SSL cert for. And then there's obviously the work of getting it installed that's actually really difficult. But yeah, they might have, now that I think about it. Actually, we should all buy stock in VeriSign right now.
What the question you still need to ask is how do they index a site that's encrypted?
Well, encrypted traffic doesn't mean you can't access it. It just means that someone can't see it in flight.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's, you know, technically it should be ITSM news. I'm sure that there are a ton of small and medium-sized businesses that do not do SSL. I know, for instance.
Or are going to be baffled by this because they have no idea why their AdWords and all of a sudden their position in the Google search is tanked.
Yeah.
Or they haven't ponied up the $15 for an SSL cert for dozens of years, and they don't even know that people use Google to get to their website.
Well, there's a lot of that, and you know what's interesting. So I think not only from an ITSM perspective, think of all the marketing pop-ups that have come up and said, we know how to do search marketing and we can help you, and they have not a technical bone in their body, but they've just themselves Googled how to optimize search, and now they have a whole set of challenges at their hands. So I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of predatory businesses like that basically they take mom and pop shops and say, hey, we can get you a Google page or we can get you listed on Google results, and they don't realize that it's actually just a form you fill out on Google's website.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go, hacking business tech.
There must be something bigger to it, though. I mean, either they're trying to prevent carriers from doing analytics so that there's more reliance upon Google. There has to be a cause for this.
Yeah? I mean, and it might be related to the Finfisher thing. Did you see this? There's a spyware software that governments and companies have been using for a long time, actually, called Finfisher, and it was leaked actually this week on GitHub. Someone posted the source code on GitHub, and it turns out that there's some. This is actually related to Farah's story about the Russian mafia claiming they've got 1 billion accounts or whatever. Most of them came from this software, and you picking apart the source code, people are actually finding which countries actually have used this to spy on their citizens.
Sure.
So funny.
Very crazy. And now my dog is going to lose his mind.
Is he seeing people in the backyard?
I think someone actually rang the doorbell. We're getting irrigation installed today. If you follow me on Facebook or your friend, well, I have a public Facebook profile. You can go read everything about my life. But we recently moved into a house, and so we were getting lawn and sprinklers and tons of stuff. So I'm sure they're actually wrapping that up right now.
Which, by the way, you were kind of giving us a virtual peek on Facebook into your house as it was developing, but I don't know that I recall like the finished product.
That's because A house is never done. It's sort of like, this is sort of like one of those enterprise projects where you try to change the entire world and it never stops. No one can ever say, we achieved success. We don't have grass yet. Once there is grass out on the lawn, which is actually scheduled for Wednesday of next week, I will post pictures.
There we go. We'll hold you to it.
So it's funny that we talk about security. Oh, go ahead.
Billion passwords get hacked. And one of the articles I was reading say if you wanted to find out if you were one of the victims, there was all these sites are popping up, but they're charging you like $120.
Oh, really? No, there's a Google Doc. If
you have to put in your password, right?
Just go change your passwords.
Well, I guess if you want, I can put it in the show notes. Someone actually put it all in a Google Doc and is just sharing the link publicly.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
It's harder to find, though, because most of them are just like, they look like dummy accounts. Some of them are all the way back to 2010, and they've got, like, IP addresses with them, and it's just trash data.
Yeah. Well, it's basic security practices. I mean, hopefully unfortunately, I know we're not past the days of people keeping their password at password, but...
I think it's important that people understand this stuff, though. I mean, it's going to become more prevalent in everyone's personal lives. And, it's sort of like we used to have to do basically public service announcements at companies to teach people, hey, don't take all these credit card numbers from an Excel spreadsheet and post them on Facebook. Like, there are these training programs. You treat this data with respect, etc. We're going to get to the point where we need to do that from a personal perspective now. I need to teach my mom, what Facebook Messenger is doing on her phone.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of Facebook Messenger, so there's another whole privacy interesting battle that's brewed again this week. I think it's now because they're making it mandatory for you to split up into the Messenger app versus the Facebook app. Versus before, I think it was optional. And all these people are up in arms about these crazy terms and conditions around, now Facebook is going to be able to control my network settings, and I don't know what crazy articles are out there. So I was kind of curious myself, and I went and I looked at my own Messenger app terms and conditions, and I did not find text anywhere near the extreme terms and conditions that have been posted out there. So I think, again, it's users needing to, the part of educating users is for them to recognize when things are a little bit blown out of proportion and how to actually understand and interpret your own terms and conditions and why it is more important than just scrolling and clicking accept.
Yeah.
Just like in the case of the billion passwords being, stolen or what have you, understanding really what is the true impact.
Yeah, but the access is the problem, though. I mean, it happens so quickly and behind the scenes, right? You go to websites, says they want to access your location or they want to access your contacts. And sometimes you hit OK, sometimes you don't allow, but then you forget about it, right? How many sites have you logged in with Twitter and you go back into your Twitter apps and there's this list like, when was I even looking at that application? So,
yeah. Well, it's interesting. So Facebook is split up into two apps, and I think we talked about this sometime last year, where a lot of these companies were more successful in making these big changes because they would give you a trial and all of these things. And I think in many ways, Facebook did the same thing. But I feel like maybe this time the why wasn't well communicated, and you see a lot more backlash, or there's just a lot more users that are more vocal. One of the two. But if I look at even the case of Foursquare and Swarm, I was like, why am I splitting up into two apps? And it was so weird. And then I was like, hey, this is really cool. I don't know if you saw the latest Foursquare update, but it's actually legit using analytics and is of value because it's understanding my taste, it's analyzing my previous check-in data, suggesting restaurants. So if Facebook was to come back and say, here's why we've done the split and this is the benefit to you, I think this might be a little bit more palatable for most users. I don't think they even realize they can switch between the two apps without even exiting.
But the synchronization is still faulty. I'll pick on Foursquare and Swarm. The notification, you get 2 notifications for each app. That doesn't make any sense.
That's true.
And if you live like me, I'm not looking at streams all the time. I really just respond to alerts and triggers.
We know, Hooper. We know.
And I'm the complete opposite. I have like 5,000 notifications that are left unread, and I'm like, ugh. I'll open the app when I need it.
But I think that's what people got up in arms about. The new Messenger app has new features and functionality where you can actually just take a picture from the Messenger app. And so it asks for permission to take pictures on your behalf. So it technically has control of your camera, which, yes, I mean, there's some preteen white boy working at Facebook who could totally take advantage of this and take pictures of the inside of your pocket every time that you open the Facebook Messenger app. But I think that people don't realize that in Apple's need to secure the device, if you want to provide additional features and applications, it's going to have to ask for permission for that stuff. And it's, you know, you just got to learn. You got to learn about that stuff.
Yep, as the technology advances, and I think that's what it is the whole educating the user community, right? What does this really mean? Why should we not panic? If you're worried, where should you really check for your terms and conditions?
Yeah, it's sort of, you know, it goes back to the same thing we've always struggled with in technology. It's not human enough. It's just data. They're data points. And so, you know, the phone is asking me for permission, express permission for Facebook to take pictures on my behalf. But, you know, if Facebook were explaining it to me, they would say, well, the code specifies that if you click the take a picture button, then it goes to your phone and says, I'm going to take a picture, and just does it. It's that balance between technical and people and permissions, I guess. I don't really know. It should be explained better, but I don't think that there's a better way. It's because it's a ecology or an ecosystem, I guess.
I think we're growing in. I think a part of also the challenge is that as a society we're growing more and more into the whole fear-based society instead of a fact-based society. I feel like we're quicker to jump to conclusions and be fearful, and maybe because of the consequences of, you know, us being able to be much more connected. It's very interesting to analyze why that happens.
Yeah. In the meantime, religious segregation is at an all-time high. Okay, we're going to skip over that topic.
Well, that's a very interesting point, though. If you are a target of genocide, and they use digital, you know, analysis to figure out who you are and where you are, you know, it is something that allows them to target you. And, you know, talk about cyberbullying. Let's talk about cyber genocide.
Yeah, you know, and so like they targeted the power plant in Gaza, you know, and it's sort of like, well, if you take that down, then people don't have power. If they don't have power, they don't have internet. If they don't have internet, we can't tell where they are.
Right.
And so, like, there's two sides of that, of course. There's the keeping civilians safe, and then there's the targeting of non-civilians. I don't. It's too complicated of an issue, and you know, my naive American brain just says that everyone should be free to believe as they do. Sad.
Challenge.
I don't think it makes you naive at all. But we are totally digressing.
We are. And you know, the thing is, I never understood why people put Post-it over their cameras on their laptops until this Facebook Messenger thing happened. You know, I never really like realized the extent of that. Did you know that in 2011 a school teacher was actually found guilty of taking pictures using school software on a school Mac of kids at home and then using it to reprimand students? So they saw this kid taking pills, and so they thought he was popping, like, I don't know, something fun, let's say, and turns out he was eating Mike and Ike's, but they showed him the pictures. And so the kid took him to court, like, you have no right to take pictures of me in my house. Really interesting.
Very, very.
And so now I guess you need a Post-it note over your iPhone camera.
Yeah. That will be the new case. That will be the new case accessory. There will be a little.
Or the new feature, a little shutter. Shutter.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll go back in time and you've got your lens cap on your iPhone. So Yahoo announced today that they're going to offer end-to-end encryption with Gmail and within Yahoo Mail. So you'll be able to encrypt your email from point to point.
So no open SMTP.
No open SMTP, but it's a PGP encryption, so it's shared key or whatever that is.
Yeah, great.
So Manel, yeah, I think it's fantastic. I've always, that you can do a secure end-to-end email, but it's really complicated at this point. So let's make it easy. And someone famously, or will be famous, I guess, tweeted, "Where is Microsoft on this?" How many businesses use email to transfer data and it's not encrypted end-to-end?
Yeah.
But they've got their hard drives encrypted.
Yeah, Office 365 leaves a lot to be desired.
Isn't it? It's just curious that we would encrypt some of our data and not all of it. And let's not encrypt the transport of this data either.
Yeah.
It kills me. Cote, one of our previous guests, put a great paper out today on 451 Research about developer communities and reaching out and having developer outreach programs.
That's interesting.
I'll put a link in the show notes because I'm actually going to do show notes this time. I swear, I promise I'm going to do it. And then someone actually responded afterwards with a counterpoint and said that it's bad, where it's bad. Really interesting.
Huh.
And they wrote from their experience at Twilio.
Oh.
And he was a developer outreach person. Like that's what he did. He ran hackathons all the time, and he said he really loved the culture in the company, but he provides good counterpoints. Actually, I'll put them both out there. You guys can respond to it.
Yeah. Because the hack mentality, it does not always resonate with the same people, and not everybody views it in the same way.
Yeah, especially in organizations.
Yeah.
He tweeted afterwards, he said that some people view, what did he put? I think it's actually on his Tumblr. He said specifically, I have to quote him on this because it's really good actually, after his big-ass report. That's what he called it on Tumblr, big-ass report. Some outfits do still see coding as a risk to be costed rather than a realizable benefit to be paid for.
Yeah.
That was a quote of beauty.
He actually shared it. It's actually from Robert Brooke, but again, still just on Tumblr. There's a ton of good developer and IT stuff on Tumblr if you pay attention. Corey Doctorow, one of our guests on the previous podcast, ITSM Weekly, his stuff on Tumblr is insane. He tweeted today, there's this great sign, he's traveling around, and there's this great sign next to a shop that says, "We have nothing from China!" ! Man. Speaking of segregation. Oh, there was a good article today about glass shredding out in Arizona, too. I guess there's a ton of CRT glass that American recyclers are taking out to Arizona, and they're shredding it out in the desert and leaving it sit, and now they're testing the soil, and there's lead all over the place. Really interesting.
Fail.
And they point out, it's good to recycle your electronics, but you have to check and see how they're doing it. Like, you need to properly recycle electronics now, you need to follow the trail. Like, literally ask them, where does it go after this? What do they do with this material after that? Like, the amount of effort it takes is insane.
Yeah, no one's going to do that.
I want to. We should do that. We should do that as a special edition Hacking Business Technology. Let's go we'll find a business that does recycling and follow the trail and see if they are getting what they promise.
Legit recycling.
And stay.
But it's interesting. Until this whole process of recycling, whether it's electronics or paper products or plastic products, I think there's so much resistance because it's still so complicated. Talk about a process that needs to be lean.
Yeah.
It's like
when I stayed at an Airbnb in New York, the instructions for recycling were, don't do it, it's too complicated, I'll get dinged by my landlord, just throw your garbage in the street trash right across the street. I was appalled. I guess New York is going to be a carry in, carry out sort of situation, kind of like the Boundary Waters.
Leave only footprints.
It's going to make Airbnb a lot harder to use.
Yeah. So for us, send something out before the show about karaoke presentations.
Yeah, I thought that was wild. So
It made me think of it. It made me think of the Impractical Jokers. Have you ever seen those guys? There's three guys from New York. They call them Practical Jokers, and they always pulling jokes on each other. And one of them, they had to stand up and give sexual harassment training to these colleagues, and they didn't know what the presentation was. So they only saw the slide in real time and then had to explain it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely YouTube that one. It's just a riot. But so the premise here is for the audience is this: you get pictures. You have a topic or a theme to talk about, and it just shows you these exceptionally random pictures. And you have to somehow bring the picture like a squirrel into your presentation, which Baron would have no problem with a squirrel.
Squirrel's easy, A squirrel, that applies to everything and nothing.
And there goes a million squirrels.
Yeah.
I don't know, I found the site. I found it, I think it's an interesting idea. I think it'd be really tough. I think it would be really hard. I love clicking through everyone and seeing the text that comes up because it looks like they show you a meme picture of some kind and there's meme text that loads, but I can't tell if it's actually related to one another or if it's just random.
Yeah, it's just random.
But you know what I found wild about the idea? We're always wondering, first of all, this was a random developer on the Agile community on Google+, right? And think about the whole developer persona, right? The typical, I guess, perception is that IT folks are introverted. They don't really, they're into their coding. They don't like to communicate. And it's of all people that came up with, it took the energy and the effort, it was a developer to go and say, this is really cool. This could be an amazing exercise, when we talk about organizational change, or we're trying to go in and say, IT, you need to learn how to communicate with the business. This would be such a cool exercise. I'm sure it would be total. I could just see myself having a whole lot of fun with a bunch of folks I know that need some communication kick in the butts.
I got a teaser of a really good Gartner article about aligning with the business. It's probably one of the best I've ever read of theirs. I should pull it up so that we can at least have the title. I can't share the link, of course, because you have to pay an ungodly amount of money for it.
Well, all the new Gartner quadrants are coming out, right? Did I see J-Rod dropping a teaser the other day on Twitter?
I didn't see it anyway, but I've been missing a lot on Twitter. I've been following more people. I need to pare that back again. It's called Integrating Governance, Enterprise Architecture, and ITSM to Drive Enterprise IT Maturity. It's fantastic. They talk about how program and project and portfolio management tie into all those things, and they actually give really good broad descriptions of the thing of those three things: governance, EA, and ITSM. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Huh.
We should get Colleen M. Young on here to actually talk about it. I think that'd be really interesting. And they talk, what one of the best takeaways is right at the end. They said, if you achieve a level 4 or 5 maturity, your CIO basically shouldn't be a CIO anymore. They're basically a COO, or what did they call it? Chief Change Strategist. I thought that was interesting.
There we go. Telling you that CIO role. It's got to shift.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, Hooper, you're going to a dentistry con this week, is that right?
Dentistry?
It said Crest. I assumed dentist.
Pacific Crest is a financial firm. They're an firm.
I'm giving you a hard time.
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking about fluoride.
Well, I know that you're in a lot of different business markets. ITSM isn't your only gig.
My days of involved with dental manufacturing are done. We sold Cut-Right. Yes, we did. Thankfully.
That's probably better that way. Oh, hey, you shared something on Google Plus that was really good. I think it was yesterday. A repost from a ServiceNow community. Did you read through that?
The problem management one.
Mm-hmm.
Who was talking about problem management?
It was Mr. Man.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Man.
Yeah, he did put something out there. It's problem management is one of those things that just drive me crazy. How people do not comprehend it. They just want to simplify it, and it's not simple.
associating it only to the reactive side.
Yeah, exactly.
So you agree with his points, is what you're saying?
Well, the post was those are my words on the post.
Oh, those are your words.
Yeah, you didn't see that I wrote that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So
I don't pay that much attention.
There was too many squirrels yesterday.
So did he interview you about it, or did he actually just steal it from your blog?
No, they did a webinar, and the question was how can you support more value or best practices around problem management. And I see so many organizations deploy problem management without configuration management. It's just a total failure. They don't have good incident, they don't have good config, and they're wondering why a problem is failing.
Right.
And the reality is, and I've argued a lot of people here, just because an incident you don't know the root causes does not make it a problem.
Absolutely. That's my number one pet peeve too. I mean, same with, I can't tell you how many situations I've seen where the first set of processes they always want to implement is incident problem change.
Yeah.
Could let that go, for crying out loud. Drop the problem. You don't need that to be one of your first processes.
I like the idea of having like a pre-problem. And I guess that is kind of an incident, but like I want to be able to say, hey, I see this trend in incidents. Yep. Is this a problem? Like proposed problem.
Yep.
Sure, absolutely.
Request for problem, RFP.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think I'm totally with Matt in the sense that config management plays such a critical role.
In everything.
It doesn't have to be a very complex mature CMDB, but to a point where you can at least understand some level of relationships that could drive you towards root cause. And I think, with incident, this is where there's also, I feel like, a gray line between people understanding major incident management versus problem management, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's another big gap that exists where people go, it's a P1, it's a major incident, we gotta go and, engage problem management. But a major incident doesn't necessarily equate with a P1, doesn't necessarily equate with the need to do root cause. So I think that gray area also makes it a little bit more complex for organizations.
Yeah. In Fritz, the framework we use at ISM, they developed a problem, truly a problem, is actually only accepted as a project. So it actually is going to issue resources and activities to accomplish an objective and get funding. And so, literally you should hear cha-ching when you think, yeah, this is going to be a problem. We're going to turn this into a problem. We're going to put a research team against it. We're going to rebuild a lab. We're going to bring some consultants in. We're going to buy some diagnostic tools. We're going to find the systemic root cause because it's just too painful at a business level to keep dealing with.
I like that. It's sort of putting money behind it is validating that it's enough of a recurring problem.
What's interesting about what you just said, I really like, and I think another critical success factor then would be, wouldn't people have to understand what the true costs of their incidents are? And I think, we're so far from there in so many places,
Yeah. So you have to justify it because, let's face it, restoration of service can be cheap and easy, and if that is the solution, that's the solution.
Yeah, I think anywhere where you get into any advanced maturity, like you said, cost of incidents, that sort of thing, you need service component mapping or business mapping or whatever you want, service mapping or whatever you want to call it. That is, I've heard it time and time again. People oftentimes, like you said, they always start with incident. I've heard it time and time again. I wish we had started with config, or I wish we had started with change. And I don't know. I think those are the two to start with.
Yeah, Greenfield is always best to start with config and change. So there was a I tweeted it actually. I went to a ServiceNow user group, and the organization was Raymond James, and they were presenting on CA. So I said, I woke up on HotROM on Bizarro World ITSM here. But they were saying that they were getting their config working first before they rolled out ServiceNow because they were going to start with config, and that was going to be the first process, and then they were going to roll out the other ones in it, and then go live all at once, but getting everything, built out from the config standpoint. I applauded them for it. I think it's a great way. And of course, they're hearing this from so many other people now, hundreds of other large institutions who have said, if you can do it, start with config. Everybody's saying it, but people just still don't do it.
You know, it's so interesting because I remember back in the days of ITIL V2, when I used to teach foundations at the V2 level, there was this one slide that always got me where they said config is the heartthrob of all of ITSM, right? Yeah. And I think it's but V3 kind of got away from that. I think because the whole notion of the SKMS and the CMS, and it just made it all so super crazy. I think it did a disservice to the concept. Like, people started to shy away from config as opposed to understand the value that it can bring. And I think now people are starting to, we're seeing momentum shift again, but, especially from people tie asset management and they get into config management naturally. But yeah, I think it's lost a lot of its momentum, unfortunately.
They made it more than it was. It was the holy grail. They made it They made it seem more difficult to attain, and they made it seem more valuable than ever. But the fact of the matter is that config management is really, really hard work. That is I think it's the hardest process. Number one, because it's not technically a process. There's a CI lifecycle within it, but really you never go into config and technically, you should never go into config and create a config record. You should never go into config and say that configuration is wrong. You're going into incident to say the configuration is wrong, or you're going into change to get a new record in there.
Well, that's so what you're saying is part of the problem, Baron, is that a lot of people look at config at that CI level, and they look at CIs as your hardware and your software components, but what the relationship value is and the relationship engine is actually your true business objectives to your business-focused services, and then the corollary to vital business functions and the systems that operate those vital business functions through interfaces and support sub-applications. And in building those definitions it is so much more than just one type of CI. There are system CIs, people CIs, service CIs, and building those relationships, it's an index.
Yeah, and getting people to agree on what the model should be. What's interesting is in a couple of our implementation approaches now, we've started with saying one relationship type, forget all the other relationship types. Let's start with one. Let's get you off the ground and running, because you guys are going to argue till the cows come home of whether something actually depends on or is, a child of, or we're going to have one relationship type. We're going to connect everything, and then we'll get you off the ground and running. And start that way. But, on that note, I think equally as much as there's a challenge in people getting that relationship part, I think there's also a big challenge now with people who did spend the time to establish some form of relationships to the app, let's say up to the parent app layer. They don't know what the so what is. So if I've got, a major HR system or PeopleSoft down, they truly are struggling with what it actually does impact from a business standpoint. It's so fascinating. People still don't know what outcomes they're delivering.
So we just started working with a client, and they said, well, we went to all of our Resolver groups to ask them what our services were. And I said, why would you do that? I said, there's a where do we start? I went to their website, and I just put in /services on it. And voila, there were all their services. Marketing had already done it. They'd already sat with their CFO and made a determination of what the cost justifiable business services you should have. So we just brought that back and showed them. I said, go talk to your marketing department. Don't make this up. And don't make it up.
This is why we need presentation karaoke.
Presentation karaoke.
Yeah, but you're going to have to tie that to a purple flamingo that's saying, has cheeseburger. It's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah. That's what IT looks like. When they say, well, this is the business value, and they show email, backup, antivirus.
I like that. That's good actionable advice, though, seriously, to get your CM to be in order. Back in the day when I was on a help desk, we would have meetings where we would sit down and whiteboard a service. The problem is that the tools that we were using didn't. A whiteboard is actually a really good and flexible tool. So we could write out what the relationships were between things, and we knew that it was actually just going to get erased after the meeting, so we weren't fighting and squibbling and squabbling about parent versus child and what's upstream and what's downstream. Because that always seems, people always fight about that. What is that, up or downstream? Who cares?
Who cares?
They're related. You know, it's like, you know, is that your brother or your sister? It doesn't matter.
Sibling.
Doesn't matter. They both need to be at the meeting.
Yeah, exactly. And so we would build these service component maps like live while we were trying to troubleshoot problems or incidents or whatever. God, I hate those terms. They just kill me. And then, you know, later that service component map would just be erased and gone forever. And it was always, that is the tribal knowledge that people are always talking about. It's not necessarily knowledge management. It's not that detailed article about how to troubleshoot McAfee antivirus sucking so much. It's the service component map of how we're actually delivering email.
But then tying that now into knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. Get you the where and then what to do about it.
Yeah.
You know, one simple tactic that, you know, in one of my past lives where I was doing some problem management work at a higher ed institution. It's too bad Mark's not here. Anyways, but one of the best things early on, actually it's probably before Mark arrived, this was before we had our formal config management process and everything launched. The CIO says to me, he goes, you know, one of our big challenges is that people, you know, getting people around the table to get to root cause is one thing. But why can't we just have a little extra procedure that if we have a major incident or a problem that's declared, one of the activities has to be, as a part of your report, a diagram of the service component, like the whole service layer. Because if we take all of those and all the problems we have, 10 problems later, we have a pretty good picture of our critical services and how they're mapped. And we would have done it without having a formal config management process. And we can use that as inputs when we're ready.
Did people do it?
That was like what you guys were talking about in the podcast I wasn't on. You were talking about this dynamic board, and you would just, you know, every time you walk by, someone has to add. You can't get in the building unless you add something to it.
Nice. Hey, that's a good idea. You can't log in for the day until you write it down.
Coffee. Coffee is for configures.
But I think the point in all of these is it doesn't have to be complicated.
It doesn't. Yeah. Snap a pic of the whiteboard. You know, leverage the tools that you have, but if they don't fit your needs, you know, do it on paper, do it on pencil, and do reserve the coffee for closers or configures. I like that. Yeah. That's how you hack business technology. Thanks for being here. Good episode, guys.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.